Have you ever thought a late bus could change your life forever? That's exactly how it all started for Andreas Münzer. Born in 1964 in a tiny village called Pack in Austria, he grew up in the countryside helping his family with their dairy business. His childhood was simple. No luxury, no spotlight, just a life built on hard work, discipline, and responsibility. Every win came from daily effort. Nothing was handed to him. Even as a kid, Andreas was always active. He played soccer, skied during the winter, and even played trumpet in the town's band. But during his teenage years, while working as a toolmaker over 10 kilometers from home, something unexpected happened. He often had to wait hours for the bus, so one day he decided to sign up at a local gym just to kill time. A small, casual decision that would end up changing the entire course of his life. Before long, that gym became more than just a time killer. It became a passion. Andreas started training seriously, even though he didn't fully understand bodybuilding yet. And here's the wild part. He had no idea he was laying the groundwork to become a legend in the sport. The gym turned into his safe space, where he could push himself more and more every day. His gym buddies quickly saw something special in him. They encouraged him to compete in amateur shows, and he surprised everyone. He wasn't technically polished, but his dedication stood out. That small-town humility mixed with his raw strength made him different. It's like the hard labor on the farm had shaped not just his body, but his mindset too. What's really impressive is how Andreas never complained, even when things were tough. He didn't have fancy equipment, expensive supplements, or world-class trainers. But he had an iron will, and honestly, that counts for more than any sponsorship deal. This first chapter of his life proves that nobody starts out ready. The best stories usually come from the most ordinary moments. Who would have guessed that a kid waiting for a bus in rural Austria would go on to build one of the most shredded physiques the world has ever seen? It just goes to show real opportunities can show up in the most unexpected places. As he started gaining momentum with his training and local competitions, Andreas knew it was time to chase something bigger. So in the 1980s, he made a bold move. He left Austria and relocated to Germany. There, he found better gyms, a more professional setup, and most importantly, a shot at being noticed. For some people, that kind of change would be risky. For Andreas, it was necessary. Have you ever had to step way outside your comfort zone to go after something bigger? In Germany, he met Albert Busek, a legend in European bodybuilding. Busek didn't just own one of the top gyms on the continent. He was also a close friend of Arnold Schwarzenegger and his longtime mentor. For Andreas, walking into that gym was like stepping into a special forces boot camp. No excuses, no half measures, just hard training, total focus, and results. Busek saw the fire in Andreas, but he wasn't the kind of coach to baby his athletes. He pushed them hard, demanded full commitment, and turned lifters into machines. Andreas jumped in headfirst. He trained like a beast, did magazine photo shoots, and always stayed stage ready. His life became an exhausting routine, but it had direction, and then the results started coming. In 1986, Andreas placed 6th at the European Amateur Championships. Not a huge win, but a strong start. Over the next 2 years, he took 3rd place at the World Amateur Championships, proving he was rising fast. And then came 1989, the big breakthrough. He won the IFBB World Games and earned the title he had been fighting for, his pro card. That changed everything. With his new status, Andreas made his Mr. Olympia debut that same year and placed 13th. Now, 13th might not sound like much, but for a first-timer on the world's biggest stage, that was huge. The Olympia isn't just another show. It's where the best of the best compete. To stand there, among legends, and walk away with a respectable spot, that was something to be proud of. That climb from the bottom to the top was anything but easy. Andreas had to give up a lot. Comfort, rest, even his health, all in pursuit of a dream. And unlike other athletes who took the slow and steady route, he hit the gas hard. He wanted to compete, be seen, and evolve fast. And with that, he gained recognition, respect, and a growing fan base. But at the same time, he started sowing the seeds of physical burnout. something that would hit hard later on. This chapter of Andreas' story is a lesson in ambition and sacrifice. How often do we chase big goals without fully accepting the weight of the journey? Andreas Münzer wasn't the biggest or the most decorated bodybuilder, but he was one of the most jaw-dropping to ever step on stage. Standing at 5 feet 8 inches, 1.73 meters, and weighing around 238 pounds, 108 kilograms of pure muscle, he looked like he'd been carved by a sculptor obsessed with perfection. What really set him apart was his insane level of muscle definition. His skin was paper thin, showing every fiber and striation, almost like something out of a comic book. And the stats were just as crazy: 21-inch arms, a 58-inch chest, and only 3% body fat, barely compatible with life. He was the living definition of aesthetic obsession in bodybuilding. Plenty of guys had size, but very few reached his level of conditioning, vascularity, and symmetry. Andreas took the concept of being shredded to an entirely new level. What's wild is that despite his intimidating look, Andreas was known for being humble, polite, and super approachable with fans and fellow athletes. No diva behavior at all. In fact, he was the kind of guy who helped out backstage, gave advice to newbies, and greeted everyone with respect. That's what made him not just respected by judges and photographers, but genuinely loved by the public. To this day, many still call him one of the most beloved bodybuilders ever. Magazines like Flex and Muscle Mag featured him on their covers, celebrating his unreal physique. His image went global and inspired lifters all over the world. Even though he never won the Mr. Olympia, he became an icon. Sometimes true greatness isn't about trophies. It's about the impact you have on people. His extreme physique also became a reference point for photographers and illustrators. Many used his body as the blueprint for the ideal physique. It was like he had brought to life everything the textbooks described as muscular perfection. But behind that masterpiece, there was a heavy price. And Andreas was paying it daily, even if no one could see it. Despite all the admiration, Andreas was never fully satisfied with his body. He always saw room to improve, a muscle to sharpen, a line to define. That constant dissatisfaction, common among elite athletes, is what pushes some to greatness and drives others to the edge. Andreas's routine was brutal. Most people burn out after a few weeks of intense training. For him, it was a lifestyle. He trained 6 days a week, twice a day, and every workout was a war. There was no space for physical or emotional rest. He believed his legs were his weak point. That could have been an excuse to skip leg day, but he went the other direction. He built a legendary lower body routine with deep squats, lunges, leg extensions, and partner-assisted negatives. The pain was constant, but for Andreas, pain was fuel. His attention to detail was obsessive. Every set was treated like the last. Perfect form, maximum tension, pure intensity. His workouts were planned with military precision. Nothing was random. There was no such thing as a mad workout. He believed only those who treat every session as a real challenge can reach extraordinary results. And his diet? Pure madness. During bulking phases, he'd eat up to 8,000 calories a day, packed with protein, rice, potatoes, chicken, and eggs. But during cutting phases, he dropped to just 2,000 calories a day while still training twice. That's like driving a race car on an almost empty tank. How did his body handle it? Only with iron discipline. But Andreas took it even further. In the final days before competition, he'd cut his water intake to just 500 milliliters a day. That's right, half a liter per day, to eliminate every trace of water retention and achieve that dry, chiseled, vascular look. It was an extremely risky method, but one he believed was necessary to shine on stage. Have you ever done something extreme to chase a goal? Of course, there's always a price. The human body needs rest, hydration, and balance. All things Andreas regularly sacrificed for the sake of aesthetics. But in his mind, there was no other way. Either he stepped on stage with the most insane physique of the night, or it wasn't worth it. That kind of mindset is inspiring or dangerous. What do you think? Behind Andreas Münzer's flawless physique was a dark reality few people knew about. His obsession with extreme muscle definition pushed him past a dangerous line: the intense and non-stop use of chemical substances. His goal was simple but extreme: to achieve the perfect body at any cost. And that cost, as we'll see, was devastating. Andreas's pre-contest stack was terrifying. It included testosterone, parabolin, halotestin, dianabol, growth hormone, insulin, and a variety of diuretics like Lasix and aldactone. These were powerful drugs used in aggressive combinations and high-dose cycles. According to reports, he took up to 40 pills a day, not to mention the injections. Can you even imagine what that does to a body? And yet, despite this heavy usage, Andreas was still marketed as a symbol of health and discipline. Magazines showed him off as a clean-eating, hard-training athlete. Hardly anyone knew what was really behind that perfect exterior. He was almost like a poster boy athlete, flawless on the outside, silently falling apart on the inside. To maintain this lifestyle, Andreas needed serious money. It's estimated he spent up to 10,000 German marks a month just on meds. To cover that, he did around 40 public appearances a year, including events, demos, and photo shoots. His schedule was brutal, but he couldn't afford to slow down. Vanity and addiction had taken over. A lot of athletes use gear, but Andreas took it to the extreme. He didn't take time off between cycles to let his body recover. He was always prepping, always cutting. That meant no chance for hormonal recovery or organ rest. His physique wowed everyone, but his health was begging for mercy. And the saddest part? He ignored the signs. His obsession with definition also meant he kept his body fat dangerously low year-round. While most bodybuilders bulked and cut in phases, Andreas stayed on the edge 24/7. That combo of brutal dieting, insane training, and non-stop drug use turned him into a ticking time bomb. By early 1996, Andreas's body started screaming for help. He began suffering from intense stomach pain day in and day out. But instead of seeing a doctor, he chose to suffer in silence. His next show was just around the corner. That obsessive athlete mindset often blinds you to what's painfully obvious. To push through, Andreas started using Nubain, a strong opioid painkiller typically used in hospitals for post-op pain or childbirth. But he used it to train. That's right, to keep lifting while his body was falling apart. Nubain hid the pain, but didn't fix anything. It was like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. Despite the agony, he competed at the 1996 Arnold Classic, placing 6th. Even then, he was already feeling sick, but he pushed on, trying to keep up appearances. His physique still looked incredible, but inside his body was screaming. What he didn't know was that this would be his last competition. Just days later, he flew back to Austria. During the flight, things got worse. He started coughing up blood, feeling unbearable pain, and losing strength. It was the start of internal bleeding. The crew had to make an emergency landing. When the plane touched down, an ambulance was already waiting. The most shredded bodybuilder in the world was now fighting for his life. Andreas Münzer died on March 14, 1996, and the bodybuilding world was in shock. He was only 31 years old, taken by multiple organ failure. A brutal end for someone who seemed unbreakable. But the autopsy confirmed what many feared but couldn't fully imagine. His body was completely destroyed on the inside. It was tragic proof that the limits had been pushed too far. Doctors who examined him were stunned. His liver was full of massive tumors, some the size of tennis balls. Half of the liver had already broken down into a foam-like mass, completely useless. His heart weighed 636 grams, almost double the normal weight, a clear sign of long-term steroid abuse. On top of everything else, Andreas's kidneys were swollen and barely functioning. His pancreas showed signs of fibrosis, a condition that messes with insulin production and digestion. And his testicles had shrunk down to the size of hazelnuts, with cysts as large as walnuts. The internal damage was widespread, like his body was quietly imploding. Years of abuse had finally caught up. Shocking, right? His blood was another red flag, thick, dehydrated, and packed with potassium. That pointed to extreme diuretic use, a common and dangerous practice in the days before a show to boost muscle definition. His blood could barely circulate, making oxygen delivery incredibly difficult. He didn't die from just one thing. It was the sum of every excess. Can you imagine your body trying to function under that kind of strain? One more disturbing detail: the contents of his stomach. Forensic examiners found whole, undigested halotestin tablets, an anabolic steroid highly toxic to the liver. That means even in his final hours, Andreas was still taking drugs to maintain his physique. His body had stopped absorbing anything, but the obsession was still in control. In total, about 20 different substances were found in his system: hormones, steroids, diuretics, stimulants. His arms were covered in injection marks, showing just how constant the use had been. It's chilling to think that while he was hailed as a symbol of discipline, Andreas was silently fighting an internal war against his own body. His death was a wake-up call, a punch to the gut for the bodybuilding world. It shattered the silence around unchecked substance use in the sport. Andreas Münzer became the symbol of a line that was crossed, not just physically, but emotionally too. His story forces us to rethink how we view the pursuit of aesthetic perfection. So, what do you think? Is beauty ever worth the price of your life? Andreas's passing shook the bodybuilding community to its core. The athlete who seemed invincible was suddenly gone, and the question hung in the air: how could this happen? Even those close to him had a hard time accepting it. He was the definition of discipline, dedication, and aesthetic perfection. But the news spread fast, stunning fans, coaches, and fellow athletes around the globe. Arnold Schwarzenegger, his idol and fellow Austrian, sent a funeral wreath with the words, "A last greeting to a friend." It was a symbolic goodbye from the man who had inspired Andreas to pursue bodybuilding in the first place. They had met face-to-face at the 1996 Arnold Classic, just days before Andreas died. Many say Arnold saw a reflection of his younger self in him. That final gesture showed there was genuine admiration between them, despite their different paths. Yet, despite all the respect, Andreas ended up being remembered more for his death than for his achievements. His competitive career was solid, filled with key podium finishes and a legendary physique, but the spotlight shifted to the tragedy. It's almost as if everything he built got swallowed up by the scandal of his collapse. Is it really fair to reduce someone so dedicated to just the ending of their story? Some fellow athletes, like Nasser El-Somebody, spoke out to defend him. In an interview, Nasser said Andreas didn't use more substances than other bodybuilders at the time. According to him, the real problem was the lifestyle pushed by figures like Albert Busek, the gym owner and business manager behind Andreas's intense schedule. For Nasser, it wasn't the drugs alone, but the lack of rest and the pressure to always stay stage-ready that broke him down. That perspective flips the narrative. Instead of seeing Andreas as reckless, we see someone trapped in a system that demanded perfection 24/7, no off-seasons, no real breaks, always on the edge. It raises a hard question. Are the people managing athletes actually concerned about their health, or just about the image they can sell? Even though Andreas Münzer never took home a title like Mr. Olympia, his legacy goes far beyond trophies. His best Olympia placement was 9th place, which he achieved 3 different times. But that didn't stop him from becoming a legend in the sport. Sometimes, respect doesn't come from winning. It comes from consistency, passion, and sacrifice. Andreas earned something rare: lasting admiration from fans, fellow competitors, and coaches alike. His name is still mentioned with respect as the ultimate example of extreme conditioning and unmatched work ethic. Plenty of athletes have won more, but fail to connect with people the way Andreas did. That just proves one thing: true legacy isn't measured in medals. It's measured in the impact you leave behind. Andreas's physique is still used as a reference to this day. He was the go-to model for studying symmetry, vascularity, and muscle separation. Every line on his body looked like it had been carved with surgical precision. That thin skin and dry muscle tone gave him a look that was almost unreal. Many still consider Andreas the most shredded athlete in bodybuilding history. But Andreas Münzer's life is more than just the story of a bodybuilder. It's a raw, honest portrait of how far a person can push themselves in the pursuit of perfection. His body was incredible, his discipline unmatched. But his early death forces us to ask the tough question: what's the real cost of aesthetics? How far is too far when it comes to sacrificing your health, your well-being, or even your life for a goal that never feels like enough? Of course, effort, dedication, and commitment should always be respected. Andreas was the embodiment of that. He pushed his body to a level that few, if any, have ever reached. But we can't ignore the price he paid. His story reminds us that the body can endure a lot, but not forever. There's always a limit, and when we ignore it, the consequences can be devastating. So the message here is loud and clear. Health has to come before vanity. Striking the right balance between performance and quality of life should always be the goal. The problem isn't wanting to improve, it's getting lost in the process. That's why Andreas' story needs to be told with honesty and care. It should inspire, but also warn. And I hope that everyone watching this video takes a moment to ask, am I really taking care of myself? If this video spoke to you in any way, go ahead and hit that like button. It lets us know this kind of deep, real content is worth bringing to the channel. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. There's a lot more powerful stuff coming your way. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a video. And if you'd like to go even further in supporting us, consider becoming a channel member. It really helps us keep spreading these messages. Now I want to hear from you. What did you think of Andreas Münzer's story? Drop a comment below. Do you think it's worth pushing your body to the limit for aesthetics? Or do you believe life needs to be more balanced? Your voice matters. It's how we build this space together. And hey, if you enjoyed this video, there's another one you'll definitely want to check out. It's linked in the description and up here in the card. Go watch it next. It's another real, eye-opening story from the world of bodybuilding that'll get you thinking even more about all this. Take care of your body, but don't forget about your soul. Big hug, and see you next time.